Chosen one, listen carefully. Do not rush past this moment. Do not scroll. Do not doubt why your attention paused right here. This is not motivation. This is not coincidence. This is a message from God, delivered to you in perfect divine alignment. You did not arrive here by accident, and you are not imagining the weight you feel in your chest as these words begin to unfold. Something within you recognized truth before your mind tried to analyze it. That recognition is the mark of spiritual awakening, and it confirms that you are the chosen one. This message was meant to reach. They misread your silence. They thought the absence of noise meant absence of movement. They assumed that because they could not see progress, nothing was happening. They called your stillness failure. They labeled your withdrawal as weakness. They mistook your patience for defeat. But what they never understood is that God does his deepest work in silence. While they were watching for visible signs, God was building unseen foundations. While they were waiting for proof, heaven was arranging provision. While they assumed you were buried, God was quietly funding you in ways no one could interfere with. Chosen one, this season was never about being understood by people. It was about being aligned with your divine calling. There are phases in the life of the chosen where visibility would be dangerous, not helpful. God hides what he values until it is fortified. He conceals what carries power until it matures. Your silence was not emptiness. It was incubation, and hidden provision flows most freely in environments where pride, jealousy, and distraction cannot reach. You may have questioned yourself during this time. You may have wondered if you missed something, if you waited too long, if obedience cost you more than it gave you. Those thoughts did not mean you were weak. They meant you were human in the middle of a spiritual war. Because, make no mistake, chosen one, the war is real. Not everything you faced was emotional. Not everything you endured was circumstantial. Some resistance came because your light carries assignment. Some delays appeared because your future threatens systems that profit from darkness. This is why God spoke to you in whispers instead of applause. This is why your growth happened privately instead of publicly. This is why your strength was built quietly while others were busy being seen. Spiritual awakening does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives as clarity in isolation, peace in confusion, and endurance when quitting would have been easier. Your divine calling required depth, not display. And God will always choose preparation over performance for the chosen one. There were nights when silence felt heavy, moments when waiting felt like loss. Days when nothing changed outwardly, yet everything was shifting inwardly. God was teaching you how to stand without validation, how to listen without noise, how to trust without evidence. These lessons do not arrive through crowds. They arrive through quiet obedience. This is where spiritual authority is formed, where discernment sharpens, where identity becomes unshakable. They looked at your life and assumed you were losing ground. They measured your progress by timelines that were never designed for you. They compared your journey to paths that were never assigned to your spirit. But heaven never rushed your process. Heaven never panicked over your pace. Every delay had instruction. Every closed door had protection. Every silent season carried hidden provision meant only for you. Chosen one, you are not behind. You are aligned. And alignment always looks like delay to those who do not understand destiny. God does not fund noise. He funds obedience. He funds humility. He funds surrender. And while others were busy broadcasting beginnings, God was financing your foundation. The resources you needed arrived exactly when your spirit could steward them without corruption. This message from God is reaching you now because the silence is shifting, not because the work is finished, but because your awareness has matured. You can see now what you could not interpret before. You can recognize the hand of God in moments you once questioned. This is spiritual awakening unfolding in real time. You are no longer asking if you are called. You are remembering that you always were. Chosen one, your light is necessary, not optional, not replaceable. Necessary. The world does not need another voice echoing fear. It needs presence anchored in truth. It needs someone who has been tested in silence and refined in obscurity. Your divine calling was shaped where applause could not reach you. That is why your impact will not need explanation. It will carry authority. Remember this, chosen one. Nothing about your journey has been wasted. Every quiet step mattered. Every unseen prayer was recorded. Every tear watered future ground. You are not stepping into something new. You are stepping into something prepared. And preparation always looks invisible until manifestation begins. If this touched your soul, comment 111, because you know it now. You were called. The season they called burial. Chosen one, hear this again and hear it clearly, because truth must be repeated until it settles into the bones. This is a message from God. You are not imagining the weight of this season. You are not exaggerating the silence. You were called, and because you were called, the war around you became real. What they called burial was not rejection. It was strategy. What looked like isolation was not abandonment. It was alignment. And what felt like delay was never denial. It was preparation unfolding beneath the surface, where only God could reach you. There are seasons assigned only to the chosen one where visibility would damage what God is building. In these seasons, heaven removes the noise, not to punish you, but to protect the process. You were not hidden because you lacked value. You were hidden because your value was increasing faster than your environment could safely handle. Growth like yours cannot happen in crowds. It requires pressure, darkness, and stillness. Just like a seed does not grow on the surface, your destiny required depth before direction. Emotionally, this season hurt. Silence always does. Being misunderstood cuts deeper when you know your heart was pure. Watching others move ahead while you stayed still tested your faith. You questioned whether obedience was costing you too much. You wondered why doing the right thing felt so heavy. But those questions did not disqualify you. They proved you were awake. Spiritual awakening often begins with discomfort because awareness disrupts illusion. God was not removing things to harm you. He was stripping distractions that would have delayed your divine calling. They looked at your quiet life and assumed you were stuck. They measured your worth by movement they could see. They mistook rest for retreat and stillness for stagnation. But heaven was not measuring you by speed. Heaven was measuring you by surrender. Every day you stayed when quitting would have been easier, something was added to you. Every time you stayed silent instead of defending yourself, authority was forming. Every unanswered explanation strengthened your spiritual spine. This is how hidden provision begins. Not loudly, not publicly, quietly, invisibly. God does not always send money first. Sometimes He sends resilience. Sometimes He sends discernment. Sometimes He sends protection that keeps you from paths that look promising but lead nowhere. Provision arrived for you in forms you did not recognize at first. Strength when you should have collapsed. Peace when anxiety should have ruled. Wisdom when confusion surrounded you. That was funding. That was heaven investing in your future. Chosen one, what looked like burial was planting. Planting always happens underground. No applause, no witnesses, no validation, just trust, just time, just darkness, doing its necessary work. Roots were forming where no one could interrupt them. Identity was solidifying where comparison could not reach you. This is why God allows misunderstanding. It keeps people from interfering too early. If they had seen what was growing, they would have tried to control it, claim it, or corrupt it. Your divine calling required a version of you that could stand alone, that could hear God without echo, that could move without permission. The silence trained your discernment. The isolation sharpened your hearing. You learned to recognize God's voice not by volume but by consistency. You learned that approval is temporary, but alignment is eternal. That lesson alone separated you from many who looked successful but were spiritually empty. The war intensified because your light increased. Darkness does not fight what carries no threat. Resistance rose because something in you carries consequence. The confusion you felt was not random. It was pressure trying to distort purpose. But pressure only reveals what is inside. And what was inside you was obedience. That is why you survived what should have crushed you. That is why you are still here listening to this message from God. Chosen one. Dignity belongs to you. You were never a victim of time. You were a student of process. Nothing about this season makes you small. It made you rooted, and rooted things cannot be shaken when storms come. The silence you endured trained you to move without needing applause. That is power. That is preparation. That is proof that God trusted you with weight before He trusted you with visibility. Remember this as you move forward. Being planted feels like being buried until growth begins to surface. But once it does, no one can deny what God has done. Your spiritual awakening did not happen to make you strange. It happened to make you strong. Your divine calling did not isolate you forever. It isolated you temporarily so you could emerge whole. If this touched your soul, comment 111. Because you know it now, you were called. God funds what He calls. Chosen one, return with me to the beginning, because truth must be anchored before it can be expanded. This is not imagination. This is not coincidence. This is a message from God. You were called, and the calling itself activated resistance. The war became real the moment your spirit said yes, even before your mouth ever did. And now you must understand this law clearly, because misunderstanding it causes unnecessary fear. God never assigns a divine calling without releasing divine funding. Never. Not once. Not in history. Not in your life. What confuses many is the form that funding takes. You were expecting provision to look like money, opportunity, or instant stability. But God funds foundations before He funds platforms. He finances endurance before He releases expansion. In your earliest stages, divine funding came as survival when you should have collapsed. It came as restraint when self-destruction would have been easier. It came as wisdom when impulsive decisions would have ruined you. That was not luck. That was hidden provision working quietly in your favor. Chosen one, heaven does not waste resources. God releases exactly what you can steward at each stage. If He had given you visible wealth before internal maturity, it would have distracted you. If He had elevated you publicly before refining you privately, it would have exposed you. This is why so much of your funding was invisible. Protection is provision. Delay is provision. Redirection is provision. And obscurity is often the most expensive form of investment heaven makes in a soul. This is where spiritual awakening shifts your mindset. You stop measuring blessing by appearance and start recognizing it by outcome. You begin to see that every time you were spared from something that looked good but felt wrong, funding was active. Every time a door closed and later you realized it would have destroyed you, funding was active. Every time you gained skill, patience, discernment, or emotional control without realizing how valuable it would become, kingdom wealth was being deposited internally. The God hides resources during preparation because exposure attracts interference. Not everyone clapping for you is assigned to you. Not everyone watching you is rooting for you. Hidden provision prevents premature access to what is still forming. It shields your future from jealousy, manipulation, and sabotage. This is why your progress looked slow to others but felt heavy to you. You were carrying unseen weight. You were managing invisible assets, and heaven trusted you enough to let you hold them quietly. There were moments you felt like you were barely making it, like you were living paycheck to paycheck, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, but you always had just enough clarity to keep going, enough strength to endure another day, enough hope to not quit completely. That just enough was not limitation. It was precision. God was teaching you dependence, not desperation. Trust, not fear. Obedience, not anxiety. These are currencies in the kingdom, and they compound over time. Chosen one, survival mode was never meant to be your permanent state. It was your training ground. Now your awareness is expanding. You are beginning to see patterns. You are recognizing timing. You are understanding why certain relationships never worked, why certain plans collapsed, why shortcuts were blocked. God was preserving your divine calling. He was ensuring that when visible provision arrived, it would not own you. You would steward it. Kingdom wealth is not just what you hold. It is who you have become. It is the ability to move without panic, to wait without resentment, to receive without arrogance. That kind of wealth cannot be stolen, and it cannot be rushed. Divine funding builds this capacity slowly, layer by layer, season by season. The silence you resented was saving you. The lack you feared was forming you. The struggle that confused you was strengthening you. The war intensified because you started seeing differently. Darkness fights awareness more than it fights success. Your light is necessary, chosen one. Necessary for people who will never hear God clearly until they see Him lived out through someone refined by fire and humility. Your life is becoming a message from God in motion. That is why the funding had to be clean. That is why the process had to be thorough. Now lift your eyes. You are not begging heaven for provision anymore. You are recognizing that it has been active all along. The shift from survival to kingdom awareness changes everything. You stop chasing outcomes and start honoring alignment. You stop forcing doors and start trusting timing. And suddenly, resources begin responding to you differently. Not because you demanded them, but because you are ready for them. Chosen one, you were never unfunded. You were just funded in ways the world does not advertise. And now that awareness has caught up with assignment, you can move forward without fear. This message from God is your confirmation. You are not late, you are prepared. You are not weak, you are refined. Your divine calling is intact, and heaven is still backing it. If this touched your soul, comment 111, because you know it now. You were called. Why your provision was hidden from them. Chosen one, return again to the origin of this truth, because repetition is how alignment settles into certainty. This is a message from God. You are not imagining what you lived through. You were called, and the moment you were called, the war around you became real. What confused you most was not the struggle itself, but the invisibility of what God was doing while others were watching. They saw nothing because they were not permitted to. Your provision was hidden from them on purpose. Not everyone is allowed to witness formation. Some people only understand results, not process. If they had seen what God was building in you too early, they would have misinterpreted it, interfered with it, or tried to benefit from it without understanding the cost. Jealousy does not always come as hatred. Sometimes it comes as curiosity, sometimes as advice, sometimes as concern. God shields his work from all of it. Hidden provision is not secrecy born from fear. It is protection born from wisdom. Psychologically, people project their limitations onto what they can see. Spiritually, they resist what they cannot control. If others had access to your preparation stage, they would have spoken prematurely into something they were never assigned to steward. Words have weight. Opinions shape direction. God insulated you so your divine calling would develop without distortion. Silence was not distance from love. It was distance from influence. Chosen one, rejection was not personal. Distance was not punishment. Misunderstanding was not failure. These were strategic layers of insulation. God was narrowing access to your life because access equals influence. When everyone can reach you, anyone can redirect you. But when God is shaping something precise, he limits voices, he reduces noise, he removes familiar faces if they carry familiar expectations that no longer fit your future. There were moments you felt forgotten, left out, overlooked. You watched people celebrate milestones while your own progress remained unseen. That pain was real, but it was not pointless. God was training you to stand without applause, to trust without explanation, to obey without witnesses. These are the marks of spiritual awakening. This is where faith matures beyond emotion and becomes conviction. Your hidden provision could not be public because public access attracts premature demand. People begin to ask for fruit before roots are strong. They want benefits before burden. They want outcomes without obedience. God refused to let your purpose become a resource for others before it became an assignment you could carry. That is love. That is protection. That is divine strategy, operating beyond human logic. The war intensified not because you were weak, but because your light increased. Darkness resists exposure. Even subtle growth threatens systems built on control and predictability. Your awareness began expanding. Your discernment sharpened. You started questioning patterns that once controlled you. That is when interference tries to enter. God responded by hiding you deeper, not to delay you but to secure you. Chosen one, divine timing is not slow, it is exact. What feels late to you is early compared to what you were not yet ready to manage. Exposure without stability destroys more destinies than failure ever could. God values longevity over speed. That is why he hides what he plans to keep. The season of invisibility was not about keeping you small. It was about keeping you intact. You were never overlooked by heaven. You were overlooked by people who were never meant to carry you forward. God separated you quietly so you could hear clearly. He allowed misunderstanding so you would stop trying to be explained. He allowed distance so you would stop negotiating your calling for comfort. These were not losses. They were clean cuts that saved your future. Chosen one, your light is necessary. Necessary enough to protect. Necessary enough to prepare. Necessary enough to refine before revealing. This message from God is reminding you that what you endured was not random. It was precise. Every delay filtered something out. Every silence strengthened something in you. Every unanswered question trained you to trust timing over visibility. Now you can see it. What was hidden was growing. What was delayed was aligning. What was silent was strengthening. Your divine calling did not require approval. It required readiness. And now that readiness is meeting awareness, you are not stepping into exposure unprepared. You are emerging fortified. Hold this truth. Not everyone gets to see the process. Some only get to see the result. And that is how it was designed. God hid your provision because He was protecting your purpose. And nothing protected by God is ever lost. If this touched your soul, comment 111, because you know it now. You were called. The transfer you did not see coming. Chosen one, return again to the beginning, because alignment is strengthened by remembrance. This is a message from God. You are not imagining what is happening inside you. You were called, and because you were called, the war became real. What you are sensing now is not pressure like before. It is movement, quiet, internal, undeniable movement. This is the stage where preparation begins, turning into manifestation, but not loudly, not dramatically, and not in ways others immediately notice. Supernatural elevation rarely announces itself. It whispers before it roars. Long before circumstances change, something shifts within you. Your tolerance for confusion lowers. Your discernment sharpens. Your reactions slow down, while your awareness speeds up. That is not coincidence. That is transfer. God does not elevate without equipping, and He does not equip publicly first. The transfer always happens beneath the surface, where ego cannot interfere and fear cannot distort. During your hidden seasons, divine funding was not only preserving you, it was depositing into you. Wisdom you did not ask for but now carry naturally. Authority that does not need volume to be felt. Discernment that recognizes danger before logic can explain it. Favor that begins responding to you differently, even when nothing about your outer life looks impressive yet. These are signs of spiritual awakening moving into embodiment. You are not just learning truth anymore. You are becoming it. Chosen one, this is why the shift can feel unsettling. You sense that something is about to change, but you cannot fully explain how or when. Old environments start feeling too small. Old conversations feel draining. Old patterns feel unnecessary. That discomfort is not dissatisfaction. It is readiness. God is adjusting your internal posture so you can stand properly when visibility increases. Supernatural elevation requires emotional stability, not excitement. It requires responsibility, not hunger. Kingdom wealth is approaching, but not only in material form. It comes as influence, access, reach, and weight. And weight demands strength. God is transferring capacity into you now, so that when doors open suddenly, you do not panic, rush, or self-sabotage. Sudden change breaks people who were never trained to carry it. You were trained slowly on purpose. You may notice that people respond to you differently now. Some feel drawn, others feel threatened. Some respect you without knowing why. Others distance themselves without explanation. This is not imagination. Authority is becoming visible energetically before it becomes visible circumstantially. The war responds first. Resistance senses elevation before celebration does. Darkness always recognizes light early. Chosen one, the responsibility that comes with elevation is real. God does not lift you to prove you are special. He lifts you to position you as a steward. What you carry will bless others, guide others, and correct others simply by being present. That is why humility was built into you so deeply. Pride would have corrupted what is coming. Obedience protected it. Divine funding now begins to change form. It starts responding to alignment rather than survival. Opportunities will begin finding you instead of you chasing them. Timing will feel more intentional. Provision will arrive closer to need instead of far in advance. keeping you dependent on God instead of control. This is kingdom order. This is how heaven sustains what it elevates. Spiritually, this transfer marks a threshold. You are no longer who you were when the process began. You are not trying to become. You are becoming aware that you already have. That awareness changes how you walk, how you speak, how you wait. You are calmer now, more grounded, less reactive. That is evidence of authority settling into place. Chosen one, your light is necessary. Necessary enough to be entrusted with weight. Necessary enough to be protected until now. Necessary enough to be prepared quietly so that when manifestation comes, it glorifies God instead of ego. This message from God is not warning you to hurry. It is reminding you to stay anchored. Sudden elevation does not require sudden movement. It requires steady presence. Do not fear the changes coming. You have already been equipped for them. The transfer did not start today. It has been happening for longer than you realized. You simply reached the point where awareness caught up with assignment. That is why this moment feels clear. That is why confirmation keeps appearing. That is why you can no longer pretend you are not called. Hold your posture. Guard your heart. Stay obedient. Supernatural elevation is not about rising above others. It is about standing firmly where God places you, and where He is placing you now requires everything you have been given. If this touched your soul, comment 111. Because you know it now, you were called. When silence turns into evidence, chosen one, return once more to the beginning, because every elevation must stay anchored in truth. This is a message from God. You are not imagining the shift you feel. You were called, and because you were called, the war around you was real. But hear this clearly now. Wars do not last forever. Silence does not remain silent forever. There comes a moment when what God was doing privately begins to speak publicly, and when that happens, evidence replaces explanation. You are approaching a season of contrast. A season where the same people who misread your silence will notice your results. Not because you announced them, not because you defended yourself, but because fruit is impossible to ignore. Vindication in the kingdom never arrives through arguments. It arrives through outcomes. God does not ask you to prove what He has already established. He allows your life to speak on His behalf. This is where emotional maturity matters. Supernatural elevation reveals character faster than struggle ever could. When doors open, when favor becomes visible, when stability replaces survival, old wounds can try to speak. Pride may whisper that you deserve recognition. Resentment may suggest you explain what people got wrong. But this is not the season for explanations. This is the season for stewardship. Humility is what keeps elevation clean. Chosen one, calm confidence is your posture now. Not silence born from fear, but silence born from knowing. You no longer need to correct perceptions. You no longer need to narrate your journey. The evidence will do that for you. When God's message moves through a life, it does not shout, it produces, and production carries authority without noise. Kingdom wealth is not loud. It is stable. It is consistent. It is disciplined. Whether it shows up as financial increase, relational alignment, influence, or peace, it demands boundaries. Everyone does not get access to what God has entrusted to you. Elevation without boundaries invites confusion. Elevation with boundaries sustains longevity. You learned this lesson in isolation, so you would apply it in visibility. Some people will return when they see change. Not all of them will be sent by God. Discernment will matter more now than ever before. Emotional maturity allows you to love without reopening doors that God closed for protection. Forgiveness does not require access. Peace does not require proximity. You can honor people without re-entering cycles that once drained you. Chosen one, remember this. The goal was never revenge. It was refinement. The goal was never to be seen. It was to be solid. Supernatural elevation tests whether you learned that lesson. You will know you are healed when success no longer feels like a weapon, when abundance no longer feels like proof, when peace becomes more valuable than applause. God's message will be proven through fruit, through consistency, through integrity, through how you treat people when you no longer need anything from them. This is where your spiritual awakening becomes visible, not through words, but through presence. Your calm will confuse people who expected bitterness. Your humility will silence those waiting for pride. Your discipline will outlast those who rushed ahead without preparation. The war does not end when elevation begins. It changes form. Instead of trying to stop you, resistance will try to distract you. Instead of attacking your faith, it will test your focus. This is why staying anchored matters. The same obedience that sustained you in silence will sustain you in visibility. Do not abandon it now. Chosen one, your light is necessary. Necessary enough to be protected until now. Necessary enough to be tested before being trusted. Necessary enough to be revealed through evidence instead of defense. This message from God is not calling you to explain yourself. It is calling you to remain aligned. Stand steady. Walk humbly. Steward carefully. Let the results speak. Let the fruit testify. Let God finish what He started without interruption from ego or fear. Silence turned into evidence because you stayed obedient when no one was watching. If this touched your soul, comment 111 because you know it now. You were called. Conclusion: you were never abandoned, only hidden. Chosen one, return to the beginning one final time and let this truth settle without resistance. This is a message from God. You are not imagining what you survived, what you sensed, or what you carried in silence. You were called, and because you were called, the war became real. But hear this now with peace. Instead of pressure, you were never abandoned. Not for a moment. You were hidden, and what God hides, He guards with intention. Every season that confused you had purpose. Every delay that frustrated you had instruction. Every quiet stretch that felt empty was actually full of divine funding working beneath the surface. God did not step away while you waited. He stood closer than ever, guiding what you could not yet see, protecting what you were not yet ready to carry openly. The silence was not absence. It was proximity without distraction. Chosen one, you were always funded, always guided, always covered. Provision followed you even when you did not recognize it as such. Strength arrived when collapse seemed inevitable. Wisdom formed when answers were unavailable. Discernment sharpened when clarity was delayed. These were not accidents. This was kingdom wealth being deposited in forms that could not be stolen, inflated, or corrupted. The hidden season had an expiration date. It was never designed to last forever. God does not bury what He intends to forget. He plants what He plans to reveal, and planting requires darkness before growth breaks the surface. You were hidden so your roots could deepen, so your identity could solidify, so your divine calling could mature without interference. Exposure before readiness destroys more than it builds. God spared you from that fate. Now, as supernatural elevation begins to express itself in your life, your responsibility increases with it. Gratitude must remain your foundation. Alignment must stay your compass. Humility must guard your access. Elevation is not a reward. It is an assignment. What God places in your hands is meant to be stewarded, not showcased. Your peace is part of your testimony. Your consistency is part of your influence. Chosen one, your spiritual awakening did not happen to isolate you forever. It happened to awaken you fully so you could move through the world without losing yourself to it. You no longer chase validation. You recognize alignment. You no longer fear delay. You trust timing. You no longer interpret silence as rejection. You understand it as strategy. That understanding is evidence of growth. The war you sensed was real, but it did not define you. It refined you. It clarified your priorities. It revealed who and what could not follow you into what God prepared. Not everything was meant to come with you. Not everyone was meant to have access. This was not cruelty. It was mercy shaping your future. Chosen one, your light is necessary. Necessary enough to be protected before being displayed. Necessary enough to be tested before being trusted. Necessary enough to be refined until it could stand without flickering in pressure. God knew exactly what He was doing with you, even when you did not. That is why you are still standing. That is why you are still listening. That is why this message from God feels familiar instead of foreign. Move forward with calm authority now. Not urgency, not fear, not comparison. What is meant for you will recognize you without force. What God has assigned will align without struggle. Continue to walk in obedience. Continue to steward what has been entrusted. Continue to listen more than you speak. Heaven responds to alignment faster than effort. Chosen one, you were never late. You were being prepared. You were never overlooked. You were being insulated. You were never unfunded. You were being invested in. And now, awareness has met assignment. Peace has met purpose. Identity has met expression. If you feel aligned and ready for what God is unfolding, comment 777 as confirmation that you recognize this moment and receive it with clarity. And if this touched your soul, comment 111 because you know it now. You were called.